We're waiting for Lucien Smith to show up. I see him coming up the walkway here, the sidewalk. He's going to be sitting down in a second. And by the way, I got a text from a friend. We were just talking about Speaker of the House Philip Gunn stepping down, and I did mention that someone did phone me this morning about running. I need to clarify, and there was some confusion there, running for the Speaker's House seat, not for Speaker. I don't have any information on that. I do expect the Speaker Pro Tem, Jason White, will be our person there that will take over, the member of the House that is likely to assume the role and be elected as the Speaker of the House. So anyhow, just to clarify, that individual, that call I was talking about, representing an individual discussing plans to run, is talking about running for the House seat that Speaker of the House Gunn presently holds. So just want to be clear. And joining us now in the Element Wealth Studios down at 2 Museums, our good friend Lucien Smith, former chairman of the Mississippi GOP. Morning, Lucien. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Gerard.
All right, so it has been a most eventful week in the political world.
It has been. It has been. When I was booked, it was before the election, and so I was expecting to come on and beat my chest and talk about how great Republicans were and how we dominated on Tuesday. And this is a very different conversation than I expected.
Yeah, you know, one of my favorite programs that I watch on a regular basis religiously is Larry Kudlow on the Business Channel. Mm-hmm. And Larry, for the last few months, has been talking about economic policy that he'd like to see enacted to cure our economic woes. And he typically has been saying, just hang in there, folks, the cavalry is coming, referring to the midterm elections to get us out of this economic malaise that we're in. So yesterday he said, well, it's a platoon. That's the way he described it. The platoon is coming.
That's right. And look, we are going to be better off than we would have been, because I think we'll get to around 222 in the House, so we will have a Republican speaker, and that's going to be better than having Nancy Pelosi. But 222, that's a 4-vote margin. So right. The Speaker won't be able to lose. He'll have to be very careful to make sure he either picks up some Democrats or keeps 100% of his caucus, which sometimes can be difficult to do. And so I don't expect you're going to see a lot done over the course of the next 2 years. But hopefully we will be able to block a lot of the bad ideas that have been coming out with the Democrats having total control the last couple of years.
Well, I think that's exactly right. If nothing else, just serving as a firewall for the remaining items on the agenda. The Biden agenda. Now, yesterday, as you probably know, he was asked, do you intend to pivot in any way? And he said, no, we're going to stay the course. So he is dug in on the Biden agenda, and he says that the people want his economic agenda. They want higher taxes on big corporations and the rich. He wants the student loan forgiveness. They want all these other subsidies and redistribution programs, if you will, the child tax credit, et cetera. They want all this. And so he's fully on board with continuing that. I don't think he can get that through the House of Representatives. How different do you think it is, Lucien, when you're governing, let's say, Representative McCarthy arises as the Speaker of the House? How different is it governing when you've got a 5 to 10 seat majority versus a 30 to 40 seat majority?
Yeah, you can get, the bigger your majority, the more you're going to be able to get done as leadership, because nobody agrees on everything 100% of the time.
Right.
You're always going to have somebody who says, well, I'm not for this, I can't be for that, because they view the problem a different way. Even people who happen to both be conservatives may look at a problem and come to different conclusions about it. And so the smaller your majority gets, the less you're going to be able to do, because one or two people saying, I can't vote for this, suddenly you no longer have the votes to pass something. You can think back to what happened in our state House of Representatives. Philip Gunn was elected in 2011 or 2012, technically as Speaker of the House, and had a razor-thin majority, and it wasn't until a cycle later where he got a big majority that he was able to get a lot done, and then after the 19 cycle where you had super majorities, he was able to really get tons done. And I think the same thing's true here. It's going to be a narrowly divided House, but they're going to McCarthy, if he's Speaker, is going to have to come up with real solutions, because that's one of my theories on why we didn't do better. Because you look at the polling data, Biden's over 50% of Americans who showed up to vote have an unfavorable opinion of Biden.
Yep.
A third of them said their top issue was inflation. 52% of them said that the party that was best equipped to deal with inflation was the Republican Party. So it should have turned into bigger numbers. But I think the problem we had this cycle, in the House in particular, was that we didn't have great messaging on exactly what we were going to do. The message essentially was, we're not the Democrats, vote for us. And so I think what we have to do over the course of the next 2 years is have real substantive proposals that address the problems that are happening in this country come out of the House and hopefully come out of the Senate and force Biden to veto them. But at the very least, the House has to show they're not just there to talk, they're there to do in meaningful ways. And so that I think is the challenge for whoever the speaker is.
It's an excellent point, Lucien. Henry Barber said the exact same thing yesterday.
Well, Henry was right, as he often is.
He is. He's excellent at reading the tea leaves and analyzing the election and the political realm and process. And I agree as well. It seems like both parties are entrenched in just this constant messaging of, we ain't them, they're worse than we are, and this is all the bad stuff that's going to happen to you. This whole narrative of democracy is on the ballot. Like, what exactly does that mean?
Right.
But I want to share this theory with you and get you to react. I actually think that was very effective, and here's what I mean by that. I think there are so many people out there that have this tendency, and I'm talking about both parties, both sides, to trust somebody high up in leadership. In this case, President Biden, regardless of what we may think about him and his mental acuity and so forth. I think there are a lot of people say, well, Joe Biden says things are going to be really bad if we vote for those Republicans. I'm not going to do that. I think it was effective.
Yeah, I thought that was more, and I was wrong, but I thought that was more messaging to their base. I thought that was being used mostly to get their base to get out and vote, to provide money, to volunteer. But I think you're right. I think that did resonate with people. And I've been critical. You and I have had these conversations before. I've been critical of some of the rhetoric that has come from our side. But this whole democracy is on the line thing is literally dangerous.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, what does it mean? But there are people, some people will write it off. They'll say, well, this is just rhetoric. It's what politicians say. But some people will take that seriously. I mean, imagine if Republicans had overwhelming majorities in both chambers and the President of the United States has said democracy was on the line in this election. I mean, if our democracy literally just ended, that's a call. I'm not saying he did this, but that is effectively a call to political violence, and it's why. And we've talked about this. We've got to tone down the rhetoric on both sides. But I think you're right. I think people heard that and said, "Well, gosh, the president said democracy's on the line. I might as well show up and vote for the folks who apparently are the pro-democracy team."
Well, to your point about the political violence, I literally heard this morning on one of the left-leaning media sources. Of course, there's a wide range of those, or no shortage. I heard one of the analysts, one of the strategists say the reason that Republicans didn't fare as well as thought is because people, quote, are sick of political violence. I mean, literally said that, and so I think you're right that message somehow, at least in the view of this particular strategist, was effective. And let's be honest, if it weren't for seats that flipped in Florida and in New York, we don't have control of the House.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was the fact that it is not decided now is embarrassing. I mean, and there are other folks to blame. I mean, I don't think the RNC made great choices when they adopted those resolutions about Representative Kissinger and Kinzinger and Cheney.
Kinzinger, yep.
I think Liz Cheney has done a lot of negative things for the party by continuing to talk about the past and serving on the committee. But as a political party, the question you've got to ask is what we're doing the most effective way to elect our people in the next election? And talking about the past is not a good way to win an election. People, especially in an environment like this where people are really hurting, folks want to know, how are you going to help me? And
totally agree.
That sort of messaging hurt us very badly, and I think that's also part of the reason that we lost.
I totally agree. So something else I think it was also critical and should be taken note of by the party. I want to get you to react on this. You said it just a second ago. We got to talk about what we're going to do. I honestly believe, as we head to a break here, we'll come back and discuss it. I honestly believe that there are a lot of people that otherwise would have voted for Republicans, and I'm talking about that squishy independent middle base, which typically makes the difference in these swing districts in particular, that are saying, well, heck, I voted Republican last time. They didn't get it done. They're not honoring what they're pledging to do. So I'm just going to vote for the Democrats. I don't trust them either. We're coming right back with Lucien Smith. Stay with us. And it's so well done. The Civil Rights Museum in particular, Lucien, is really neat in that it starts, just at the beginning of human inhabitation, honestly, of the state of Mississippi, all the way through the Civil Rights Movement to where we are today. And though we have some stain on the state of Mississippi, no doubt about that, we can't deny that, we also have to recognize and celebrate the many accomplishments and just how far we have progressed as a state. And we don't get credit for that. And it's not like we want a pat on the back. We just don't want you to keep describing us as the way we were 150 years ago, which they have a tendency to do.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah, this is a special place, and if you're in a position to come and go through it, you ought to, because it does speak to how far we've come, talk about in a very serious way the problems of our past, and it's just an incredibly high quality
it really is.
Museum. It's like going into a Smithsonian, and it's a great
awesome
thing that we've got here in Mississippi.
It's awesome. All right, so we were talking about these election outcomes before the break there. I just still thinking that even though exit polls continue to show that voters put economic matters and their personal household situation at the top of their list of concerns and issues, it didn't translate at the polls. I just have this theory that they don't really trust Republicans to address those issues because they didn't offer any concrete plan. Your thoughts?
I think that's right. I think they didn't vote for us in large part. We had candidate problems. There were some other problems in the Senate and the gubernatorial races, but the best explanation to me in the House races is just that, is that they didn't trust us, and I think they didn't trust us in part because we didn't offer the sort of concrete, specific proposals that were offered back in the contract with America in the 94 race.
Exactly.
And so I think people have been burned. The other piece of it, I think people have been burned so often, conservatives, by electing Republicans who say they're going to do things. We were talking about this off the air.
Yeah.
We ran a whole campaign a decade ago on how we were going to repeal and replace Obamacare. That never happened.
Never happened.
And so I think people have a unusually high skepticism of congressional Republicans because they've just failed to deliver on a lot of these major things that they've campaigned on. And so I think with that history, coupled with our failure to really offer specific proposals, and I think Kevin McCarthy has a 53% unfavorable rating with voters.
Right.
It's not helpful to say we're going to replace Nancy Pelosi with someone you don't like, and so I think that also played a role in it on the House side.
I totally agree. And the dilemma, it seems, as we've become a little more populist, I think, and less or so focused on concrete, specific, definitive policy. The dilemma to me, Lucien, and this is something I've thought about for years, really going back to the 2016 election cycle in particular, is that the voters want to hear certain things from you, such as I'm going to repeal Obamacare. And if you don't say that, then you probably won't have a chance of prevailing. But if you do say it, the likelihood of you actually accomplishing it is like zil to none. Because that's not the way the legislative process works. Fortunately, we don't want the president to be a dictator and with the swipe of a pen just rip out this giant piece of legislation. And so it's Donald Trump. I talked about this with you off the air there during the break. Donald Trump. Give me 8 years, I'm going to get rid of the debt. In 4 years, we're going to not have a deficit. Well, okay,
which is impossible.
Right, it's impossible. It's just mathematically impossible.
Right.
And so, how do we get to a point where we start espousing? How do we get here and still get voter confidence? We espouse intentions. We espouse a good policy, but it's also, I guess, with a caveat that we got to have the stars aligned.
Well, I think we've got to be careful about making promises that we know are impossible. And I think in the context of Obamacare, we said repeal and replace, but we never really said what we were going to replace it with.
Right.
You'd get all these, they would ask congressional Republicans, well, what are you going to replace it with? And you'd get these kind of mealy mouth. Well, there's going to be a better thing that keeps what you like and gets rid of what you don't like, and it's going to be better. We're going to call it something else. And so I think we've got to be more honest about what we're going to do. We've got to be more specific. And I also think we've got to do more talking about why we're going to do the things that we're going to do, because things like student loan repayment, which I think is a terrible idea, it was bad policy, probably illegal because it didn't go through the Congress. All we said was we're against it. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about how we're going to make America's working class effectively subsidize America's college graduates who are who've gotten degrees that aren't as valuable as they should have been. I mean, there's no reason that Joe the plumber should effectively be paying for my student debt. That if I took it on, that's my problem. But those are still popular items, and we've got to do a good bit more of talking about why we're for those things.
And in fact, exit polls revealed that 18 to 29-year-olds in this country voted 64% for Democrats. I honestly believe there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because only Democrats were pledging, at least Joe Biden as the president, with an executive order to forgive all the student debt, and that's the age group that has all the student debt.
That's right.
And the second thing is, and we just got to be honest about it, Lucien, there's an indoctrination to leftism occurring on our college campuses. There's no doubt about it.
On our college campuses, it looks like sometimes in K through 12, and then you've got a media apparatus that, with relatively few exceptions, is effectively an arm of the Democratic Party. Now, I will say, we also made some bad decisions this cycle. We chose some bad candidates. I mean, Herschel Walker doesn't have any business being in the U.S. Senate. Agreed. Neither does Raphael Warnock. I hope Herschel Walker wins. But had we picked one of the other candidates that were in that primary for Georgia, we probably would have won.
Right.
I think the same thing's true of Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. Not as bad as Herschel Walker, but it's not even clear if he really lived in Pennsylvania. There were other people in there who would have been more competitive. And Dr. Oz was hurt by Doug Mastriano being the Republican nominee in Pennsylvania, who was a terrible candidate and only won the nomination because Donald Trump came in and endorsed him. But that had a negative effect everywhere else on the ballot, and it hurt Dr. Oz. And so, we've got to pick better candidates moving forward. And the president, Donald Trump could have done a lot more to help these folks. He's sitting on $100 million in cash. What a difference does $20 million or $30 million in independent expenditures from President Trump do for Herschel Walker in Georgia? What does $20 or $30 million do for Blake Masters out in Arizona, or Adam Lasalle in Nevada? I mean, those are races where an investment from the president of all that money that he's accumulated this cycle through fundraising could have made a difference. I mean, we might be sitting here talking about whether we would have a 53 or 54 vote margin in the Senate, but we're not, and that is certainly a piece of it. And the candidates that he helped get nominated, a lot of times they were loyal to him, and I certainly appreciate the interest in having candidates who are loyal to you, but if they're loyal to you but garbage candidates who can't win, you've not only not gotten yourself an ally in the Senate, you've also hurt the party and hurt the conservative movement. And so, the choices that we made in some of those races were really disappointing.
A lot of folks still have concerns. They're stinging about the 2020 election and the prospect of election fraud, election irregularity. But it's become a litmus test for many. And it is for Donald Trump. In fact, you're talking about his allocation of his giant pot of money there. New Hampshire was a state I think we had a chance to win with the candidate up there. Senator Maggie Hassan, of course, defeated Don Bolduc, who I think was a quality Republican candidate. But Trump actually elected not to provide some funding and some capital to the Bolduc campaign because he disavowed his previous stance on the election fraud. He initially said, yeah, I think that the election was stolen. Trump was behind him. Then he disavowed that. I think for political purposes in New Hampshire, honestly.
I think that's probably right.
And then Trump said, okay, I'm out. I'm not going to help you anymore. And he dumped all his money in Ohio, or a big chunk of his money
up there for J.D.
push J.D. Vance, which just keeps us even with Senator Portman stepping down. So we got to get away from these litmus tests. We got to get more nuanced. We got to be more holistic, I think.
That's right. And it ties in, I mean, it's sort of the other side of the coin of what we were talking about the need for specificity. Most people, I understand there are people who feel very strongly about the 2020 election. That is not an election winner. The overwhelming majority of Americans don't believe that.
Correct.
And if that is your messaging, feel free to believe it. But if that is your core messaging or a major piece of your messaging, it is going to get you beat in almost every election in this country.
Let's be honest.
And we got to get past it.
It's the factor to a number of voters, including in our state. If you don't support the idea of election fraud, I can't support you.
That's right.
We're still seeing that.
That's exactly right. It's not good politics.
Lucian, appreciate you coming on. Always good.
Absolutely, Gerard. Good to be with you.
Yeah, man. Rachel Myers, Deputy Director, 2 Mississippi Museums, coming up next. The Element Well Studios down here at 2 Museums in beautiful downtown Jackson. Stay with us.